Over the last 7 months or so, I've released retrospectives on some extreme sports and racing games that helped define the late 90s, 2000s, and early 2010s. This time around, I want to shine a spotlight on some of the studios behind the games, the ones that brought them to life. Some are still around, a few have merged into bigger teams, and a few are sadly gone for good. My name is OneHip, and thanks for clicking on this video. Before we get into this one, I just want to thank those who helped get the channel to well over 2,000 subscribers recently. This means a lot, and it keeps me going with these videos. I genuinely appreciate the support, so thank you once again. After doing a video about the story of Neversoft, which received an incredible response, and with so many of you asking for videos about other studios, I decided to bring this next developer video forward. This time, I'm diving into the life of Black Box Games, later known as EA Black Box, before their eventual closure. This is the studio that brought chaos to traditional sports titles, defined the street racing genre, and revolutionized skateboarding games with a control scheme that changed everything. This is their story. In 1998, Black Box Games was founded in Vancouver, Canada, by a group of former Radical Entertainment employees, most famous for games like The Simpsons Hit and Run and the Prototype series. Black Box was based in Burnaby, British Columbia, and no formal hierarchy was created. Rather, they were just a group of friends who wanted to create inventive games and leave their mark on the growing home console market. Among the founders was the late Martin Sykes, who sadly passed away on Christmas Eve in 2007 at just 39 years old. Vancouver itself had become a rising hub for video game development since the early 80s. In 1982, the PC game Evolution, considered the first computer game with multiple levels, was developed there. A year later, Distinctive Software was founded, eventually becoming EA Canada after an acquisition in 1991. By the late 90s, other Vancouver-based studios had formed, including Barking Dog Studios, later known as Rockstar Vancouver, and THQ Canada, later known as Relic Entertainment before their closure. Interestingly, Barking Dog Studios was also founded by former Radical Entertainment employees, something of a trend in the Vancouver scene at the time. Black Box's first project came in 1999, the ice hockey sim NHL 2K, published by Sega and released exclusively for the short-lived but beloved Dreamcast. Known in Europe as Sega Sports NHL 2K, the game was released on February 9, 2000 to positive reviews from critics, with praise for its gameplay, graphics, and use of peripherals such as the VMU for certain features. Around the same time, Black Box developed the PlayStation version of NASCAR 2001, a licensed racing simulator for the famous stock car racing brand, released on September 19, 2000. The game was published by EA, who would also develop the PlayStation 2 version of the game. 2001 was the first in the NASCAR game series to include real-world car manufacturers, something that Black Box would revisit in an iconic racing series years later. Both versions received average reviews from critics, with praise for its sense of speed, but criticism for its sound design and immersion. Their next project showed how versatile the studio could be. In 2001, Black Box worked with Midway to develop another ice hockey game, but this time a chaotic arcade version of the sport, featuring relaxed rules and 3-on-3 gameplay, in the spirit of other Midway titles like NBA Jam and NFL Blitz. Hits 2002 was released as a launch title for the Xbox and GameCube, and was also available on PS2. The game received favourable reviews on all platforms, with the Xbox version often being considered as the strongest of the bunch. Within just a few years, Black Box had made both simulation and arcade sports titles, worked with major publishers like Sega, EA, and Midway, and shown an ability to handle multiple platforms. EA took notice, and in 2001, they'd invite Black Box to work on the PlayStation 2 version of the next entry in one of their most popular racing franchises. By mid-2001, Black Box was wrapping up its final contracts with Sega and Midway, delivering one last sports game for each publisher. Sega Soccer Slam was released on GameCube on March 19, 2002, and on other consoles later that year. The GameCube and Xbox versions received positive reviews, while the PS2 version had mixed reception. Praise was given to the intuitive control scheme and over-the-top but comedic characters. Their final collaboration with Midway would be NHL Hits 2003. a sequel to their earlier arcade hockey title. Released on September 16, 2002, like its predecessor, it stuck to its exaggerated formula, which won over critics and players once again. Casual hockey fans appreciated its pick-up-and-play appeal, but Black Box was shifting gears. In October 2001, EA announced Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, a direct sequel to 1998's Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit. 7 months later, the game would feature at E3 2002 with its own booth. In June 2002, during the game's development, Black Box Games was acquired by EA and became a wholly owned subsidiary of EA Canada, with a new name to match: EA Black Box. On October 1st, 2002, Hot Pursuit 2 was released on consoles and later on PC to generally positive reviews. The game featured cars from a variety of real-world manufacturers, including Ferrari, Lamborghini, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz among numerous others, with police pursuits being one of the game's selling points. An option to play as a police officer to try and arrest speeding drivers was also included. The PS2 and Xbox ports received the most praise, and at the 2003 Interactive Achievement Awards, now known as the DICE Awards, the game was named Console Racing Game of the Year. Most notably, the PS2 version was the only one with features like desert courses and mirrored tracks, as EA claimed that due to time constraints, these could not be added to other versions of the game. Hot Pursuit 2 was also the first in the Need for Speed series to feature licensed music, which would be a pivotal element in future installments. Hot Pursuit 2 would be a turning point for the studio, proving that they could deliver fast and high-impact racing with style. The game's success helped grow the studio, and with momentum on their side, EA gave them the keys to the franchise. By early 2003, EA Black Box had grown so rapidly that they lacked space for current projects. To keep up with the demand of multiple projects, EA expanded the studio by leasing the top 4 floors of an office building in downtown Vancouver. In that same year, and now being able to work on several games simultaneously, they would release 2 titles under their new name. The first was a return to sports simulation games with NHL 2004, released on September 23, 2003. It received positive reviews from critics, with notable improvements to its gameplay and game modes, including an improved franchise mode named Dynasty. Fans appreciated some small immersive touches as well, such as an animation of the Stanley Cup winning team skating around in celebration while holding the cup before gathering for a team photo. Something commonplace in sports games now, but rare at the time. The inclusion of the track Shatterday by former emo band Vendetta Red that played when in the player stats screen was a small but memorable piece of the game's identity. Their most notable 2003 game, however, was Need for Speed Underground, which leaned into the import racing scene that was part of pop culture at the time. The game was released on November 17, 2003 to critical and commercial success, selling over 15 million units in its lifetime. The game brought notable features to the series, such as a career mode with a storyline and a garage where many vehicles could be kept and swapped around. However, Underground's main selling point was its car customization system, with the ability to change and upgrade visual and performance paths for all 20 licensed vehicles from 13 real-world manufacturers. Police chases, a franchise staple, were removed to focus on modding and racing. Praise was also given to the game's soundtrack, featuring an eclectic mix of hard rock, hip-hop, and electronic tracks. Despite the game's success, criticism towards the repetitive tracks, rubber banding AI, and the lack of free roam were noted at the time. But overall, the game catapulted EA Black Box into the mainstream. EA Black Box would release their final ice hockey game, NHL 2005. The game was released on PC and consoles in September 2004 to favourable reviews, with the console versions receiving a licensed World Cup mode, thanks to a deal with the International Ice Hockey Federation. And for the next 3 years, EA Black Box would go all in on racing. A follow-up to Need for Speed Underground was released in November 2004. Need for Speed Underground 2, the game which introduced free roam to the franchise. It would go on to sell 11 million copies and become a bestseller on every console it was released on. Praise was given to the game's expanded customization options and event types, its gameplay and graphics. Minor criticism was given towards the game's blatant product placement on the player's in-game cell phone and billboards across the open world. But despite this, Underground 2 solidified EA Black Box's position at the top of the racing genre. By 2005, the studio was firing on all cylinders. In March that same year, they became independent from EA Canada while still under EA's ownership. This gave them a chance to bring more creativity and personality into their next project, and what followed would become one of the most iconic racing games of its generation. Thank you for still being here with me. I've done retrospectives on many of the games featured in this video. If you want to see those as well as other videos like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Anyway, back to the video. On November 15th, 2005, the 9th Need for Speed installment was released. Need for Speed Most Wanted shifted away from the neon-soaked nighttime streets of Olympic City and Bayview to the sun-soaked city of Rockport, and it was a massive hit. It became the best-selling game in the series, with 18 million units sold worldwide. The customization system introduced in Underground was no longer about style. Rather, it was about losing heat from the cops, who made a return to the series. Critics praised Most Wanted's crisp graphics, punchy sound design, and stylized FMV cutscenes, as well as the return of exotic cars. And with its mix of street racing and high-stakes pursuits, it quickly became a fan favorite. It's considered by many Need for Speed fans to be the best in the series, but of course, that's always up for debate. The massive success of Most Wanted led to a direct sequel a year later, Need for Speed Carbon, which continued the story from the last game. This time, the player returned to a nighttime setting in the new open world of Palmont City. While the game was received well, it faced some criticism about its lack of emphasis on police chases compared to Most Wanted, as well as frustrating boss races. Cars were now divided into different classes, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. Late 2006 to mid-2007 was a busy time for EA Black Box, with 3 games being developed, the heaviest workload in the company's history. Among them was their final foray into arcade sports, but this time the puck was replaced with a basketball, with EA Sports' big game NBA Street Home Court, the 4th and final installment in the NBA Street series. It was released on February 20th, 2007 to favourable reviews, despite some criticism for the lack of game modes compared to its predecessors. But the game was praised for its tight controls and high-flying trick system. It was the first EA Black Box title released exclusively on 7th generation consoles, and the first Xbox 360 game to be natively rendered in 1080p resolution. It was a strong send-off for the series, and it was also one of the final releases under the EA Sports big label, which was retired the following year. A racetrack-focused Need for Speed title, Need for Speed Pro Street, was released on November 14th, 2007, after more than 2 years of development. This dramatic shift from an open-world setting to closed-circuit racing wasn't received well by players and critics, with mixed reviews upon the game's release. For many, it felt like the Need for Speed series had peaked, but behind the scenes, EA Black Box was working on something completely different. A prototype for a physics-driven trick system was taking shape, and by the end of 2007, it would evolve into a landmark title that redefined what a skateboarding game could be. By 2007, the Tony Hawk series had experienced a decline in popularity, and with that, there was an open lane for something new to take its place. EA Skate, or simply Skate, was released on September 13th of that year, and introduced the Flick It control system. In addition, the game had a grounded and more realistic style, and it put skate culture front and center. Flicking the right joystick a certain way would trigger a certain flip trick, with the use of trigger buttons enabling grabs and modifiers. Grinding was simply flipping or ollieing onto a rail, bench, or other asset and using the joysticks to perform certain grinds. And manuals simply required the player to slightly tilt the joystick forward or backwards. Skate was released to very positive reviews, with praise for its immersive city, San Vanalona, revolutionary Flick It control system, and carefully curated soundtrack. Minor criticisms were noted, such as the low camera being frustrating at times, the steep learning curve, and latency issues when playing online. This was a skateboarding game made for skateboarders, and it was successful enough for EA to greenlight a sequel. Before that, however, came a spin-off game for the Nintendo Wii, DS, and iOS called Skate It, released in late November 2008. To allow for the lack of processing power compared to other 7th generation consoles at the time, the game was set after several earthquakes had destroyed Sandvan, allowing each area to be closed off in a level select style, rather than having an open world like the original game. For the Wii port, the Flick It system was incorporated into the console's Wiimote movements, and the addition of a nunchuck would allow for more precise steering and air spins. The DS version would utilize a stylus to do tricks, and on iOS, which was a direct port of the DS version, swiping the touchscreen would trigger the controls. All ports received average reviews upon release, with compliments to the Wii version's surprisingly deep career mode, as well as its place in between the events of Skate and the next installment in the series, Skate 2. The biggest criticism went towards the graphics, which were described by a few critics as bland and nasty. Around the same time, the 12th installment of the Need for Speed series, Need for Speed Undercover, was released. With the game going back to a story involving street racing and police pursuits in an open world, fans and critics expressed concerns with many of the game's aspects. The game was considered too easy, and Undercover's story, setting, FMV cutscenes, and repetitive elements were seen as inferior to earlier titles. Concerns about the declining quality of the Need for Speed franchise were no longer speculation. Undercover made it clear that something was off. On December 19, 2008, EA announced that EA Black Box would be relocated to EA Canada's Burnaby facilities, and their Vancouver site would be shut down. Rumours had circulated about potential layoffs resulting from this, but EA assured staff that EA Black Box would remain open. The studio would retain its independence after the move was completed in early 2009. On January 21st of that same year, Skate 2 was released for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 to positive reviews. Praise was given for the improved Flick It controls and its new authoritarian setting, an expanded version of the original city called New San Vanalona, with its architecture being inspired by cities such as Paris, San Francisco, and EA Black Box's hometown, Vancouver. You could now get off your board, move objects, and walk or jump around. Some consider this installment to be the best in the series, but like most Wanted for Need for Speed, this is also subject to debate. In that same year, EA Black Box assisted Slightly Mad Studios to develop the console and PC versions of Need for Speed Shift. 2010 was another busy year, with new installments for both Need for Speed and Skate being released. Skate 3, the last game in the series developed by EA Black Box, was released in May 2010 to positive reviews, with praise going to Port Carverton, the new open world city, as well as the improved controls and online multiplayer options. The game's popularity increased in 2014 thanks to Let's Play channels on YouTube, most notably PewDiePie, showcasing the game's glitches and ragdoll physics. This increased demand for Skate 3, and it led to EA issuing reprints of the title. Meanwhile, Need for Speed World, a free-to-play MMO racing game, was launched on July 27, 2010. It was released to mixed reviews, with criticism aimed at its login issues, technical instability, and a lack of a single-player mode. Sounds familiar. The game's servers would be shut down on July 14, 2015, along with other free-to-play games published by EA at the time. By this point, EA Black Box's momentum was fading. Their next Need for Speed title would be their last. After assisting DICE with elements for Battlefield 3, EA Black Box returned for what would be their final standalone title, Need for Speed The Run, released on November 15, 2011. Unlike some previous games in the series, The Run featured events in real-life locations, including New York, Chicago, Las Vegas, and San Francisco. Despite an extensive marketing campaign, the game was released to mixed reviews, despite being seen as a slight improvement to previous games like Undercover. Then came the cuts. In February 2012, EA confirmed layoffs at EA Canada and EA Black Box, with more of a focus on online gaming and free-to-play models. EA Black Box continued operating under its name until July that same year, when they were renamed Quick Lime Games during the ongoing development of Need for Speed World. And in April 2013, the studio had closed for good. The Need for Speed franchise was taken over by Ghost Games, while some remaining Black Box employees assisted Visceral Games with Battlefield Hardline in 2015, under the name EA Jawbreaker. Others found work developing racing games at other studios, but the black box that had once been filled with excitement, energy, and creativity had its lid shut for good. And just like that, the studio was gone. During its 15-year run, Black Box Games evolved from a scrappy startup into one of EA's most influential studios. They didn't just follow trends, they set them. In the early years, they proved that they could build chaotic arcade and grounded sports sims. But once Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2 was released, they took the wheel of a franchise that would define mid-2000s street racing culture. With Underground, Most Wanted, and Carbon, they created an era of racing games, and when that era started to slow down, they pivoted again. Skate was a massive risk, a skateboarding game with no 1000-point combos or jackass antics, just realism, community, and control. And it worked. Because like the best studios, Black Box understood that great games don't need gimmicks. They just need purpose. Even as the pressure mounted, and even as layoffs came and priorities shifted, EA Black Box kept trying to make something meaningful. And while their final projects didn't hit the highs of the past, their legacy was already cemented. From San Vanalona to Rockport, from Flickit to Full Throttle Racing, Black Box wasn't perfect, but they mattered. And if you ever drifted through the streets of Bayview, or popped a clean tray flip over a ledge in Port Carverton, then you were part of it too. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here. This video is part 2 of a new series where I spotlight the developers behind the games we grew up with. The first episode being about Neversoft. If you want to see more, I've got retrospectives on some EA Black Box Need for Speed titles, as well as all 4 skate games they made. I'll be going back to game retrospectives for a couple of weeks, but I'm looking forward to doing my next developer video. These are really enjoyable to put together. If you enjoyed this one, give the video a like, and subscribe to watch more video essays like this, as well as retrospectives and reviews that I've done. Big thanks to my current channel member and super thanks donor. Your extra support truly means a lot. There are links in the description for channel memberships and my Ko-fi page if you wanted to support the channel further. My name is OneHip, and you have a good one. Bye!